Snowboards are designed for going fast on, and if you were to do nothing to your snowboard all season long, you'd probably find that quite quickly you wouldn't be running that fast anymore. You'd have your mates overtaking you on the flats and you'd probably be wondering why. Well, if you flipped your board over, you'd probably notice that your base was starting to get quite dry. Now, snowboard bases are made out of a porous material called Petex, and if you leave them for a while without really maintaining them, they're going to absorb all the wax that was once in them and leave them quite slow. So the trick is to put fresh wax into that board and keep it running nice and quick, which is what we're going to be showing you today. So to wax your snowboard, you'll need an old rag for cleaning off your base with. You'll need an iron that is fine to get all waxy. Preferably don't nick your mum's one because she'll probably shout at you. We'd recommend getting one with a flat surface like so. You can get these demon ones quite cheaply. You'll also need a brush for structuring your base. Some wax, of course. We're using an all temperature beaver wax today, and this is a really good general purpose wax that you can use in any type of conditions. You can also get high temperature waxes for spring conditions, as well as cold temperature waxes when it's really cold out. And finally, you'll need a scraper for removing excess wax. So step one is to get your board ready for waxing. Now this is actually a brand new board that hasn't been waxed yet, this Ride DH. So while you could take it straight out onto the snow, we'd always recommend giving your board a wax straight right off the bat, just to protect it from any rocks you might encounter on the first day. However, if you do have a board that you've been riding before, that you've been riding in spring conditions, you may notice that the base is quite dirty, and you'll want to really remove a lot of that wax beforehand, before you start putting a fresh coat on. There's two ways you can do this. You can either buy some base cleaner, spray a little bit onto a rag, and then wipe it down. You never want to use too much base cleaner because it can actually soak into the base and stop further wax from then absorbing in. The second method is to use what's called a hot scrape, which we're not really going to cover today, but it's essentially when you wax the board really quickly and scrape it immediately, which will flush out all of that old wax. As I mentioned though, this board is brand new, so there's no need to do any of that. We're simply going to give it a quick wipe down and get straight to waxing. So the next stage is to grab your waxing iron. You want to set it to a medium temperature to start off with. You never want your waxing iron to be too hot. Grab your wax, so we've got our all temperature wax here, and we're going to start dribbling wax onto the base of the board. Now you want quite a good decent amount of coverage on there, so what we're going to do is start at one end, and we're going to melt a little bit of wax, and we're going to run all the way down one edge. You can be quite generous. And we're going to loop around, we're going to go down the other edge. Your edges are quite important to focus on because that's where a lot of your speed is lost. So make sure you cover those well, and then we're just going to zigzag up and down the board. If your waxing iron starts to smoke, if the wax starts to burn, that's definitely a bad sign. It means your waxing iron is too hot and you could be at risk of damaging the base, so just turn it down a bit. So now that we've got some wax spread over the board, we're going to start melting it in, and we're going to try and get a nice even coating of wax all over the board. So we're just going to lightly melt that. And the trick here is really to keep the waxing iron moving. You never want to keep it in any one place for too long, because that can, as I mentioned earlier, damage the base. So you want to make sure that every part of the board is covered in wax. Now, it's personal preference whether you wax all the way to the end of the board. Like the nose and tail of the board actually don't really make contact with the snow, so if you want to save on wax, you don't have to wax all the way. So because this board is brand new, it doesn't have any bindings on it, which is ideal for waxing. If you do have bindings on your board, you may want to loosen them up a bit because it will make the base a lot flatter and you'll be able to rub wax in a lot more evenly across the whole thing. So a good way to know when to stop waxing is if you just feel the top sheet underneath. You want it to feel warm to the touch. Anything more than that and you're probably heating up the base a little bit too much, so that's a good indicator. So you've left your wax to cool down thoroughly, so either for an hour or so or overnight if you've got time to spare, and you're ready to start scraping the excess off. If you leave the wax on, you're actually going to find that the board runs really slowly, so this is a really important step to get it nice and flush. So find yourself a nice sharp scraper and then you can start scraping the wax off. Try and go in nice long strokes in one direction, so from tip to tail. And a good way is to draw the wax towards you. So nice smooth passes. So you've just scraped off all that excess wax with your scraper. A really good step to take next is to grab a Brillo pad and just go over it again, just to get any last bits off. The more of this excess you can remove from the base, the faster it will run. But if you do happen to leave some on, it will probably come off relatively quickly when you're on a groomer. And a really good final step is to use a wire brush to expose the structure of your base. What that's going to do is create some grooves running tip to tail, which will allow water to run down it and let that board run just a little bit faster. So starting at the nose, you're going to work your way down to the tail in nice smooth strokes. And there you have it. Give it one final wipe down and you are good to go. So I've just shown you how to wax your snowboard, and we can't really stress how important this is in keeping your base as good as new, running really quick. Certain boards will absorb wax quicker than others, so sintered bases, for example, are more porous, and you'll probably find out that they dry out a little bit quicker than your extruded bases, for example. And you can't really wax a board too much. Just check if it's dry. If it's looking dry, get a fresh coat of wax on there and you'll be good to go.